"Ma'am, your husband has been in an accident. He's in a coma." That was the call I received from the hospital, without any warning. I rushed there, desperate, but as I arrived, my daughter grabbed my arm and whispered, "Mom, Dad's not sick. He's faking it." Stunned, I could barely respond. "What are you saying? Don't say that." Then she handed me her phone, and as I looked at the screen, my world came crashing down. Welcome to Velvet Vendetta. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel and like the video to hear what's next. My name is Isabella Serrano, and this is the story of how I was betrayed, broken, and finally avenged. But before the fall, there's always the calm, the illusion of safety. I was an ordinary woman, a wife, a mother, a professional. I had a comfortable life in the city of Savannah, Georgia, a jewel of the American South, with cobblestone streets and historic squares that told centuries of stories. I worked as a real estate agent at a local firm with an enviable client list. I was respected, valued, and I loved what I did. My husband, Hector, was the manager of a regional bank, a soft-spoken, kind man admired by our neighbors. We had a daughter, Lucy, 15 years old, intelligent, creative, a bit reserved, but with a light in her eyes that brightened everything in her path. We were the picture of stability. That autumn afternoon, like so many others, I waited for Hector for dinner. Lucy was helping me in the kitchen, laughing at a video on her phone, distracted. I was setting the table, thinking about how quickly time had passed. Our daughter was almost a woman, and we were about to celebrate our 18th wedding anniversary. But Hector didn't come home that night. He sent a text. "Swamped with work. I'll make it up to you tomorrow." Lucy just shrugged. I smiled, but deep down, I felt that inexplicable unease. It wasn't the first time. For the last 3 months, that message had become a habit. I tried not to overthink it. I preferred to focus on my work. I had just closed the sale of a luxury property in the most sought-after area, the Cypress House, a century-old mansion on the banks of the Savannah River. For me, it wasn't just a sale. It was a validation, a door opening to something bigger. Days later, I got an unexpected call from Karen, a close friend and colleague from the agency. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. "Yes, why?" "I heard rumors they're going to promote you. Regional director." I was silent for a few seconds. This wasn't just good news. It was a huge step. But before I could share it with Hector, he told me he was leaving for the weekend for a strategic meeting in Charleston. Lucy noted my expression as I hung up. "Another trip?" she asked. I nodded, forcing a smile. "It's for work, honey. Your dad is very busy." She frowned, but said nothing. She went back to her room, leaving her plate untouched. Alone in the living room, I stared at my wedding ring. For the first time, it felt heavy. It was at the end of that month when everything fell apart. It was a Friday, and I was discreetly celebrating the mansion sale with my colleagues when I received the call that would change my life. "Mrs. Serrano, we're calling from St. Joseph's Hospital. Your husband, Hector Serrano, was admitted after a serious car accident. We need you to come as soon as possible." My senses shut down. The wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. The voices around me became a distant buzz. I don't remember how I got to the hospital or how I told Lucy. I only remember the coldness of the hallways, the impersonal white light, the sound of machines monitoring the vital signs of a motionless man. Hector was in a coma. The doctors spoke of cranial trauma, possible neurological damage, the need for constant observation. My heart sank with every word. I remembered our vows, our wedding in a small chapel in downtown Savannah, the day Lucy was born, and how he cried without shame. I wanted to believe this was just another test, that he would open his eyes and everything would go back to how it was. For weeks, Lucy and I took turns visiting. We read to him, played music, told him about school. She brought him drawings. I brought him hope. But there was something that wouldn't let me rest. And it wasn't Hector's silence. It was the behavior of a nurse, Carmen Valdez. Carmen was kind, dedicated, but her presence was too constant, almost intimate. She volunteered for night shifts, smiled every time she saw me. She would touch Lucy's shoulder as if she were her aunt. And sometimes, when I arrived unannounced, she seemed nervous. At first, I thought it was jealousy or paranoia, until one day, Lucy said to me, "Mom, do you think Dad is really in a coma?" The question hit me like a stone. "What are you saying, Lucy?" She looked down. "Sometimes, it seems like he reacts, like he's pretending." I wanted to laugh, to say it was crazy, but I couldn't, because deep down, a seed had been planted, and when the seed of doubt sprouts, the truth begins to rot. Today, looking back, every detail seems like a clue. Every night I slept alone, every forced silence, every look from Lucy trying to warn me of what I refused to see. It's strange how the human mind works. When you start to suspect something, everything changes. Gestures that once seemed natural now look forced. Silences that were once comfortable become awkward, and the simplest words sound false. After Lucy's question, the one that shook my soul, I began to see everything with new eyes. I started analyzing every little detail of the hospital routine. Carmen's gestures, her frequent presence on shifts that weren't hers, her quiet visits at unusual hours, and of course Hector himself. The way his hand always fell in the same position, his head tilted to the same side, as if he were an actor following a rehearsed script, but I didn't want to believe it. The pain of imagining my husband was faking all of this was greater than the pain of losing him, because if it was true, then he had betrayed me in a way that was beyond imaginable, a betrayal against our love, against our trust, against our daughter. It was Lucy who took the next step. Without telling me, she started going to the hospital at different times than our scheduled visits. She said she was doing it to feel useful, and I believed her, or I wanted to. She carried a notebook, claiming she was writing poems, but what she was really doing was observing, taking notes, taking pictures. One afternoon, she came home from school paler than ever. "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing. I'm just tired." But her eyes told a different story. That night, she didn't eat. She locked herself in her room. The next morning, after breakfast, she left an envelope on the table. "Open it after I'm gone," she said, gave me a kiss, and left. Inside the envelope were 3 photos, printed on plain paper, but clear enough to take my breath away. In one, Carmen was sitting on a bench in the hospital garden next to a man with his back to the camera. In the second, she was kissing his cheek. And in the third, the most devastating one, that man was looking directly at the camera. It was Hector. I was paralyzed. I don't know how long I stared at that image, my heart pounding in my throat. My husband, who had supposedly been in a coma for over a month, was walking, smiling, meeting with the nurse outside the hospital. My first reaction was denial. Maybe it was a fake, a twin brother, a mistake by Lucy, but deep down, I knew. I had always known. Lucy didn't ask me anything when she returned. She sat down, took her plate, and ate in silence. And so did I. We were 2 women facing each other, both betrayed by the same man, united by a silent pact. Don't speak yet. Wait. Observe more. In the following days, my mind was a whirlwind. Memories assaulted me. The nights I slept alone, the dinners I cooked for no one, the hugs he rejected with excuses of work stress. It all made sense now. The irony was, I still loved him, or at least I thought I did, and that's what hurt the most. With the help of Karen, my friend and colleague, I began discreetly consulting lawyers, without giving names. I wanted to know if faking a coma could be considered fraud. The answer was direct. If insurance is involved, yes, it's a serious crime, especially if payments have already been made. That's when my head exploded. Hector had a life and disability insurance policy through the bank. A large one, very large. I vaguely remembered signing papers with him years ago when we bought the house. I never stopped to read them. "It's just for family security," he had said. But what if all this had been planned? What if Carmen was part of the plan? Lucy, noticing my state, asked to talk. "Mom, I saw something else. What is it? They meet at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the hospital. He goes in disguise with a cap and sunglasses. But it's him. I followed him once. I recorded a video. He's not sick, Mom, he's acting. She showed it to me. Hector smiling, sitting, talking, holding hands with Carmen. And at the end of the video, he stands up, looks around, and walks away as if nothing was wrong. I felt both nauseous and furious. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with a photo in one hand and the phone with the video in the other. How could someone fake a disability to deceive their own family? How was he able to look at our daughter and feign unconsciousness? The next morning, I made a decision. From that moment on, he was no longer my husband. But first, he was going to regret it. My revenge would be silent, calculated, and as devastating as his lie. That Saturday, the Savannah sun seemed to mock me. It shone brightly, as if nothing had happened, as if the world were still just. But I knew better. Justice didn't arrive with light. It arrived with shadows, and that's what I was carrying now. Lucy and I kept up the routine. We went to the hospital, took turns visiting, spoke to the doctors. We pretended. Deep down, we were setting a trap, and every sweet word I now said to Carmen came with hidden venom. "Any spasms today?" I asked one afternoon, with the most natural expression I could muster. "Not yet, but we're still optimistic. His brain activity is responding well," Carmen replied with that same rehearsed smile. What she didn't know was that I already had copies of the tests, that I already knew the data had been manipulated. It was Lucy who discovered it. With the help of a school friend whose father was a radiology technician, we found that the reports submitted to the medical board had been forged. They bore the signature of a retired doctor. Yes, Carmen was clever, but I was more determined than she could ever imagine. On Monday, Lucy came to me with tears in her eyes. "I saw him go into the room, Mom." "What do you mean you saw him?" "I got here early this morning. I hid in the hallway. Carmen went in first. Then he showed up in his disguise. He looked around and went in quickly. I recorded it." She showed me the video. Hector, walking down the hospital corridor in regular clothes and a baseball cap. He stops at the door, looks, and enters. Then the camera shakes. I couldn't keep recording up close, but I stayed outside. I heard voices, laughter, then silence. My blood was boiling, but not with rage. It was something deeper, the certainty that I was about to shatter this lie with my own 2 hands. I decided it was time to see for myself. The following Wednesday, I invented a work commitment. Karen covered for me without asking questions. Lucy went to school as usual, and I went to the hospital mid-morning unannounced. I dressed discreetly. I entered through the visitors area with a coffee in my hand, wearing an expression like so many other wives who walk those cold halls hoping for a miracle. I hid behind a partition in Wing 4B, where I could see the entrance to room 412, and I waited. 20 minutes later, Carmen appeared, her lab coat open, phone in hand. She looked anxious. She went into the room. 5 minutes later, he appeared. My heart stopped for a second. Hector, my husband, the man who had supposedly been in a coma for over 2 months, didn't limp, didn't hesitate. He walked to the door, looked around, and went inside. I ducked down and went around the hallway. I approached without making a sound. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the scene looked like a sick theatrical play. Carmen was fixing the sheets, turning off unnecessary machines. Hector was sitting in the armchair next to the bed, with the IV still connected to a tube that wasn't even attached to a real bag. It was all a setup, all an act. "They're buying it," he said, laughing. "Of course they are. You're good at this," she replied, sitting on his lap. My stomach turned, but I didn't move. I was cold, like a hunter watching her prey at its most vulnerable. "The minimum time has passed. They'll release the insurance payout soon. And after that, goodbye, Savannah," he whispered, stroking her hair. "You think Isabella doesn't suspect?" "She's always been naive, always trusted too much." I smiled to myself. Oh, Hector, you really don't know me at all. I left in silence. I went to the reception desk, asked for the name of the hospital's administrative director, and scheduled a meeting with her for the next day, discreetly, without raising suspicion. Then I went to the parking garage, got in my car, and I cried. Not from pain, but from relief. I finally had what I needed. The next morning, I sat face-to-face with Dr. Clara Mendez, the hospital director. I understand your concern, Mrs. Serrano, but Mr. Hector Serrano is registered as a patient in an induced coma. Dr. Mendez, I interrupted firmly. What I'm about to show you will change all of that. I opened my tablet. I showed her the photos, the videos, the forged test results, Lucy's recorded statement with the date and time. She fell silent. Her face went from skepticism to disbelief, then to horror. This is serious. Extremely serious. And if you'll permit me, your hospital could be a victim here too. This could be fraud against the hospital, the insurance company, and the state. The doctor stood up. I need to call our legal department. Do it, but I'm not going to the police yet. I want him to think he's winning. She looked at me, surprised. You have a plan? Not just a plan. I have a revenge. And it will be perfect. That afternoon, I returned to the hospital as usual. Lucy came with me. Carmen greeted us with the same old smile. No changes yet, but we're still hopeful, she said. I approached the bed. I looked at Hector. He was lying down, eyes closed, breathing controlled. An impressive actor. I took his hand gently. Hector, the sky is beautiful today, like that summer in Charleston, do you remember? Nothing, no reaction. He was still faking, but I didn't need the truth from him anymore. I had the advantage now, and when you have the advantage, you control the game. And the game was just beginning. Some people think revenge is about screaming, breaking things, taking justice into your own hands. But the most effective acts of revenge don't make a sound. They wait, they watch, and when they strike, it's already too late for the enemy to escape. In the days following my meeting with the hospital director, my plan took shape. I couldn't rely on just videos or photos. I needed something deeper, more precise, irrefutable. So I called Clara, my older sister, a civil litigation attorney in Atlanta. She answered my call immediately. He did what? She screamed when I told her everything. He faked a coma for over 2 months, with help from the nurse? And the police? Not yet. I want everything airtight. I want him to pay in the most painful way possible. Then you need to protect your assets, she said. She guided me step by step. Open a new bank account solely in my name, separate documents, transfer power of attorney for the real estate business to my associate, freeze the joint credit card, and most importantly, request a detailed report of Hector's recent financial movements from the bank. What I discovered was just the beginning. Hector was drowning in gambling debts, maxed-out credit cards, personal loans, shady deals with lenders, including one from Miami with a history of extortion. And then, 2 large bank transfers in the name of Carmen Valdez. There was no doubt left. It was a scheme, fraud from every angle. The life insurance, the medical disability, the emotional manipulation, all perfectly timed. I took a deep breath and built a case file. I printed everything, the images, the videos, the bank statements, the financial records. I prepared a USB drive with digital copies. It was time to contact a criminal lawyer. That's how I met Edward Ramirez. Serious, meticulous, with no time for sentimentality, exactly what I needed. He read through everything without flinching. This is a case of aggravated fraud. He's looking at a minimum of 4 to 6 years in prison, and the nurse will be prosecuted as well. I want justice, I replied. He'll get it, but you need to be strong. He will try to manipulate you until the very end. I smiled coldly. He can't do that anymore. That week, I continued visiting Hector at the hospital. Now, it was my game. I'd say ambiguous things to him, hold his hand with feigned sweetness, like the devoted wife. He played his part masterfully. Sometimes I wanted to give him an Oscar for his role as a scoundrel. Lucy, on the other hand, started avoiding the hospital wing. She didn't want to see him. She said just the thought of him made her sick. I understood. She needed to process it at her own pace, but she remained my greatest ally. She recorded a new video where Carmen could be seen getting out of a car, laughing on the phone and saying clearly, "When the insurance pays out, we're out of here." Perfect. That was enough. On Friday, the hospital received a surprise visit from the insurance company. The director, now on my side, had already passed everything along to them. The investigator inspected room 412 carefully, reviewing cameras, medical records, and logs. As he left, he pulled me aside. "He's lying," he said, his face tense. "We're activating the fraud department immediately. When will the payments be stopped?" They were suspended this morning, and the case will be handed over to the district attorney's office. That night, Lucy and I hugged in silence. For the first time since the accident, I slept peacefully. The following week, the headlines started to appear. Fraud suspected at public hospital. Coma patient may be faking. Hector still didn't know. Carmen might have heard rumors, but nothing concrete. Until the police arrived. It was a rainy morning. I got to the hospital as usual. I went to room 412 and knocked softly. "May I come in?" Hector was pretending to sleep. Carmen was beside him, flipping through a magazine. "Of course, Isabella," she said, smiling. I walked in, looked at them both, and approached the bed. "You know what bothers me most about all of this?" I asked softly. "What's that?" she said. "That you thought I would never find out." At that moment, the door swung open. 2 men in dark suits, accompanied by a uniformed officer, walked in. "Hector Serrano, you are under arrest for insurance fraud, grand larceny, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. Get up." He didn't move. "He's in a coma," I almost said sarcastically. I said, "Get up." Nothing. Then the detective stepped forward and ripped the sheet off him. Hector's eyes flew open. "This is absurd. We have sufficient medical examinations and images," the officer interrupted. "Now get up, or we'll carry you out." Slowly, he sat up. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Carmen started screaming. "I'm a nurse! I didn't do anything!" But no one believed them anymore. They were led out in handcuffs, past the stares of doctors, patients, and staff. At the hospital entrance, reporters swarmed the exit, and I, standing next to the director, said only one thing. "Let this be a lesson. No one should play with the lives of others." That night, Lucy and I had dinner on the patio. She was distractedly cutting strawberries. "He's going to jail, right?" "Yes, honey, for a long time." She nodded and then smiled. "You were stronger than I imagined." "I was strong because I had you." She took my hand, and together we toasted with grape juice to the beginning of a new chapter. But my story with Hector wasn't over yet. The trial was approaching, and with it, the chance to expose everything. Every lie, every detail, every manipulated tear. And I would be there, standing tall, ready to face the man who tried to destroy my life and who would now face justice. Nothing prepares a woman to face the man who tried to destroy her and still remain standing. The courtroom was packed that morning. Journalists, curious onlookers, hospital employees, even former clients from the real estate agency where I'd worked for years. Everyone wanted a front row seat to the coma husband case. The scandal had made national news. It was like watching a TV series, only with real pain. Hector entered in handcuffs, thinner, his hair disheveled, with a few days' worth of stubble. He tried to maintain a dignified posture, but his eyes darted restlessly around the room. He knew it was all over. The theater, the lies, the evasions, everything. Carmen was sitting a few feet away from him, staring at the floor, pale as a sheet. I, on the opposite side, kept my head held high. Beside me, Edward, my lawyer, arranged his documents with surgical precision. On my other side, Lucy squeezed my hand tightly. Her eyes were firm, though I knew that inside she wished she were anywhere else. The judge arrived at 9:05 a.m., a bald, direct man with no patience for theatrics. That played in my favor. Superior Court of Chatham County is now in session. Case 03-27124. The State versus Hector Serrano and Carmen Valdez. Charges: insurance fraud, forgery, criminal conspiracy, and malingering for financial gain. The prosecutor stood, presented the case clearly, listing the facts: the simulated accident, the faked coma, the attempt to collect a multi-million-dollar disability policy. As they began to show the evidence, the videos, the photos, the bank statements, the forged medical records, I noticed something strange. Hector didn't react. Carmen cried, trembled, shook her head. But Hector was just absent. A defeated man, a man stripped bare before his moral ruin. When I was called as the prosecution's main witness, I rose calmly. The room fell silent. I stood in the center of the courtroom, adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and spoke. My name is Isabella Serrano. I was married to the defendant for 18 years. We have a daughter. And for 2 months, I believed my husband was hovering between life and death. I paused for clarity, my gaze fixed on the judge. Every day, I went to the hospital. I spoke to him. I held his hand. I cried for him. We canceled trips. I put my work on hold. We reorganized our entire life. I prepared myself to grieve. And all the while, he was laughing behind my back with his nurse. Murmurs filled the room. I continued. I am here today, not just as a victim. I am here as a woman, as a mother, as a citizen, and I respectfully ask for justice, because this isn't just about money. This is about emotional cruelty, a crime against human dignity. I returned to my seat amidst contained applause. The judge banged his gavel, demanding silence. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Doctors, colleagues, technicians, and experts testified. The defense tried to argue that Hector suffered from a dissociative disorder, that he was under immense work pressure and had a breakdown. Carmen claimed she was manipulated, that she didn't understand the extent of the deception until it was too late. But no one believed them. The evidence was undeniable. The pictures of him walking outside the hospital, the videos inside the room, the text messages with Carmen, it was all irrefutable. At the final hearing, the judge paused before delivering the sentence. This is an atypical, painful, and profoundly outrageous case. A cold, calculated plan that abused the public system, the good faith of medical professionals, and above all, the family. Justice cannot turn a blind eye to this. Everyone held their breath. Hector Serrano is hereby sentenced to 5 years in state prison for insurance fraud, grand larceny, forgery, and malingering. The silence turned to whispers. And Carmen Valdez is sentenced to 3 years of supervised probation, with the possibility of serving her time with community service, pending judicial review. The sentence was delivered. When I looked at Hector one last time, there was no expression on his face. I expected hatred or regret, but all I saw was emptiness. A man who had lost everything, even the capacity to feel. Leaving the courthouse, the reporters surrounded me. Mrs. Serrano, do you have anything to say to the public? I took a deep breath. Just one thing. Whoever fakes suffering deserves to carry the weight of the truth. The following months were about rebuilding. I went back to work and was promoted to regional director of the real estate firm. We moved to a quieter neighborhood. Lucy started photography classes, and I began to find myself again. One afternoon, I received a letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Hector. I took a deep breath. I thought about throwing it away, but I opened it. Isabella, I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know I think about you and Lucy every day. You were everything I failed to appreciate. If one day you can look back without resentment, I want you to know I am truly sorry. Take care of our daughter. Take care of yourself. Hector. I read it, put it away, and never replied. Because sometimes the greatest punishment is silence. It's been a year, and today, as I water the flowers in the garden of our new home, I realize something simple and profound. The pain doesn't disappear, it just changes places, and when you decide to move forward, it transforms. The house we live in now is in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Savannah. It's simple but filled with light and open windows, the opposite of the darkness we lived in for so long. It's the first property I bought in my own name, with my own money. No empty promises, no secrets. Lucy is about to finish high school. She started taking photos and opened a small social media account where she posts portraits and landscapes with poetic captions. Sometimes she shows me her pictures and asks, "Does this remind you of anything?" And it almost always reminds me of myself, of the woman I was, and the woman I am now. At work, they promoted me to regional manager. The company entrusted me with expanding to other cities, so I travel a few times a month. I got my place back in the world. I regained my self-respect. But more than anything, I regained my peace. Sometimes I think about Hector, not with anger or pity, just as someone remembering an old story with torn pages. I heard through the lawyers that he's attending psychological therapy in prison and that Carmen managed to commute part of her sentence to supervised community service. Lucy received another letter from him a few months ago. She read it but didn't reply. She said she needed to keep her distance to be able to breathe. I respected that. I never forced forgiveness, not for her and not for me. One spring Sunday, we had a barbecue in the backyard. Karen came with her kids. Clara, my sister, stayed with us for the weekend. It was she who introduced me to Gabriel, an old friend of hers, recently divorced and putting his life back together. At first, I was hesitant. The last thing I wanted was someone trying to fill a void. But Gabriel didn't try anything. He came into my life slowly, without rushing, without promises. And maybe that's why he stayed. We got to know each other little by little. Coffee at small cafes, talks about books, laughter over silly things. We never talked about the past at first. On our 5th or 6th date, he told me, "You don't have to explain anything, Isabella. You've already survived the worst. I just want to be close, if you'll let me." And I let him. One night, Lucy came home from class and found Gabriel and me on the couch watching an old movie. She looked at us, went to the kitchen, came back with popcorn, sat down between us, and smiled. "We're all okay here now," she said. "Yes, we are," I replied. And it was true. When summer arrived, I took Lucy to Charleston for a week. We went to the same beach where Hector and I had our honeymoon many years ago. This time it was just us. We walked on the sand, took photos, talked about life, about the future. As the sun set, sitting in front of the ocean, she looked at me and asked, "Mom, have you forgiven yourself yet?" I took a moment to answer. I looked at the horizon, felt the wind on my face. "I'm still forgiving myself, honey, but now I can smile without feeling guilty." She nodded, rested her head on my shoulder, and we just sat there. Two women, two survivors, two complete versions of ourselves. Time doesn't erase scars, but it teaches you that they are part of your story. Today, when someone asks me who I am, I don't say I'm a betrayed woman or a victim of fraud or the wife of a criminal. Today, I say, I am Isabella Serrano, and I bloomed in the very place they tried to bury me. Thank you for watching Velvet Vendetta. If you enjoyed this story of justice, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more.